Troy and Rose met when she literally bumped into him while they were both attending the University of Wisconsin. He was starting his third year in a journalism program and was wearing a suit because he had a job interview at one of the local newspapers between classes that day. As he stood in line at his favorite cafeteria, a tall blonde woman with her nose in a book literally ran into him, spilling coffee all over his clothes. As the girl, who Troy thought was barely 18 years old, apologized nonstop, he couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. Tan skin, long blonde hair with no dark roots, pulled back into a ponytail, and underneath those glasses were the most beautiful brown eyes he'd ever seen. She was wearing sweatpants with a school logo and a Bon Jovi t-shirt, unlike many of the trophy wives in preparation he saw at school. Beautiful and real. "Hi, I'm Troy," was his response to her halting apology. She stopped and looked at him thoughtfully, which he soon became accustomed to, and then said carefully, "Rose, but you need to clean this, otherwise there will be a stain." "It's okay. Besides, I have an interview in 20 minutes, and I don't have time to run home and change," Troy said, waving him off. "Oh, damn," Rose exclaimed, covering her mouth. "Look, I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to say." "Obviously, they won't think I poured hot coffee on myself," Troy said with a laugh. She laughed too, showing a full smile with dimples on her cheeks. "If it bothers you that much, maybe let me buy you a coffee. I have the same break on Wednesday, and I'll probably be here again. Will that ease your conscience?" She grinned, shook her head, and said, "Bye," before walking away. A guy Troy had seen before, but never talked to, came up to him and said, "Forget it, buddy. She's too tough for you. She's too tough for anyone here." Troy shrugged it off as jealousy. He went to an interview, told a great story about why his suit had a huge coffee stain that brought two female interviewers to tears of laughter, aced the interview, and received a call on his cell phone that he got the job before he left campus. However, Rose was in his head, that beautiful girl in nondescript clothes with the most beautiful eyes and smile. Wednesday seemed so far away at that moment. On Wednesday, Troy was so excited that he missed the professor's question about media ethics. As always, he joked and laughed it off, and the professor grinned and winked. He was used to being the class clown even when he was a star quarterback in high school. Humor was his support, as well as a distraction and source of pickup lines, especially after a serious injury ended his career as an athlete. It also made him seem more confident than he actually was, especially around women. After class, he almost decided not to go to the cafeteria. In the end, he reasoned that he had allowed the guy's words to influence him. The worst that could happen was that she wouldn't be there, or she would be there with her boyfriend. When he walked in and saw her smile and wave at him, his heart jumped a little. They found a more private bench in the corner, and Troy let her talk about herself, asking questions. Rose Ann Peters was in her second year of the business management program, majoring in marketing. She had a younger sister and divorced parents. She loved sports playing and watching, as well as reading, especially horror. "Well, Mr. Journalist," Rose said, nodding at his textbook, "is the interview over, or do you have any more questions before you tell us anything about yourself?" "Why did you agree to meet me?" Troy asked. "You're too smart not to realize that the relief from guilt was just an excuse to spend time with you." "Well, Troy, that actually made me feel less guilty," Rose said with a shrug. "Believe it or not, I hear a lot of excuses. However, most guys look at my breasts while they say that. You never look at them. And you continue to look into my eyes." Troy subconsciously couldn't help but glance at her breasts after that comment. Rose was back in sweatpants and a hockey jersey. Why didn't he notice earlier on her slender figure that her breasts were huge, at least a size D? He quickly returned to those eyes. "Well, obviously you're incredibly beautiful, but I need to know if you're that beautiful on the inside before I start making lewd comments about your breasts to pick you up." She laughed and shook her head. "That last part was a joke, obviously, but you're serious about wanting to know the real me, aren't you? Well, Troy, I have to go to class, but next time it's my turn to find out all about you. I want to find out if you're that attractive. Inside as well as outside before making lewd comments about your body. She winked, and he almost choked on his iced tea. As she stood up and took a step, Troy said, "Wait, do you want to go out to dinner sometime?" Rose grinned again and said, "I think we'd better exchange numbers, and I'll agree on two conditions. First, you talk about yourself. Second, on our first date, we go to an inexpensive place that serves good greasy burgers." By Saturday night, they were already on their third date, and Troy was a little behind in his studies. The first date ended with a kiss. He'd never been so excited on a date before, but that night, with her hair and makeup, Rose looked like someone out of a movie, almost too good to be true. After the second date, he felt more confident. Rose giggled, waved goodbye, and walked up to her apartment. On Saturday night, their third date included a picnic with dinner from a food truck and a walk through the park where they relaxed on a bench. There was no date on Sunday as both realized they needed to catch up on schoolwork. Troy was distracted and called her twice, talking for over an hour both times. The last time he heard voices was on Sunday night. She had two roommates. In a muffled voice, he heard Rose say, "Not now, I'm talking to my boyfriend," and nothing could wipe the smirk off his face. On Monday morning, Troy was called to the newspaper by his boss, a kind old man named Duncan, to see if he wanted 2 tickets to the Green Bay Packers game that evening. When he met Rose for coffee at their now unspoken routine, he asked her to go to the game with him. Rose got a strange look on her face that Troy would never forget, and she said she couldn't because she had to work. Of all the things they shared with each other, Rose never mentioned that she had a job. She quickly changed the subject, which made Troy a little skeptical. He'd never had a girlfriend cheat on him. Usually either he or she ended the relationship first, but a few friends had. It was clear that Rose was hiding something from him. It was hard not to think it was another man. He joked as a distraction, as usual, but inside he was starting to think that everything with Rose might be too good to be true. Troy ended up taking his older brother Jason to the game, who seemed excited for a permitted night out from his very pregnant wife Lisa, who is expecting their first child. The location wasn't the best, so Troy took a pair of binoculars with him to keep an eye on the action. Halfway through the second quarter, Jason, already feeling quite cheerful after a few beers, asked to borrow his binoculars. "Damn, wow," Jason said. "The blonde on the end has the most beautiful breasts on the planet. And her legs, damn." He handed the binoculars to Troy, who wasn't one to look at cheerleaders even when he was free. Troy was a man after all and appreciated the beautiful woman, so he took a look and almost dropped his binoculars. The hot blonde Jason was drooling over was Rose, jumping and frolicking on the field side in her skimpy cheerleader outfit. "I know her from school." Jason chuckled and took the binoculars back. "You may know her, but you have as much chance as the rest of us. Such a beauty chooses her boyfriends from the millionaires on the field." "Don't talk about her like that, asshole," Troy snapped and snatched his brother's binoculars, nearly spilling his beer. "Damn, do you really know her?" Jason said. Troy sighed. "We met on campus, we went on a few dates." "And she never told you that she cheerleaders NFL?" Jason shook his head, frowning. "Sorry, brother, if you had the chance, she would have said it. I hope you at least got yours before she moves on to the next player." Normally, this would be the moment Troy would make a joke. Instead, he resisted the urge to hit his drunken brother because what he said made sense. No wonder she acted strangely when he mentioned the game. Troy didn't meet Rose the next day and didn't call her that night. On Wednesday morning, he saw that she called after he went to bed, leaving a message that she missed him and would see him for coffee. Again, she was wearing glasses, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt. Like Clark Kent hiding his true identity, Troy thought. "Hey, I missed you. Did you enjoy the game?" Rose said again with a strange expression. She seemed to be expecting a hug or a kiss and was disappointed when Troy gave neither. "Listen, we need to talk," Troy said as they walked to their secluded table. "So you saw me," Rose said with a smile. "What do you think?" I missed one turn in the third quarter, but I didn't think I was bad. Troy lowered his voice. Why did you hide this from me? Are you embarrassed of me? Rose looked like she had been punched in the face. Are you really mad about this? What, now that I am a cheerleader's NFL, am I supposed to be some shallow dumbass? Is this what you think? No, I didn't hide anything from you on purpose. Honestly, I thought you knew it wasn't a secret. Why do you think I said that all the guys look at my breasts? I just found out that you didn't know when you invited me to play with him. Rose frowned and shrugged. Inside I thought, wow, he really loves me. I didn't tell you then because I was hoping it would be a nice surprise to find out you were dating a professional cheerleader. We are dating, Troy said dismissively. Okay, I don't know what this relationship is, but you need to figure it out, Rose said. I can't believe you're angry about this. Troy, I've told you things about myself that even some of my loved ones don't know. You know the real me much better than the guys who look at me when I shake my ass at every home game. I like you, Troy, I really like you, but if mine, cheerleading is such a problem for you. She shook her head and stood up. Call me later and tell me you've decided. Later that night, Troy was sitting in the pub with Wes, Andrew, and Roger, old friends from school with whom he still kept a close connection. Sorry, maybe I'm already drunk, but what the hell is the problem? Said Andrew, being his usual blunt self. Stunning NFL cheerleader wants to date your lame ass. Troy shook his head. You do not understand. Okay, what don't we understand? Said Wes. She didn't dump you. She asked you to decide if you wanted to dump her. It's obvious that you really like her. What's the problem? Troy gestured to his body. I know I'm not ugly, but even when I was in shape, I was never in perfect shape. Not like the professional players she's with. Not to mention, I'll be lucky if I will earn in my entire life what some of them earn in a year. We all know the stories about cheerleaders and players. Don't you think she had a few of those? You're welcome, Troy Picker, said the waitress, Sally, who had also gone to school with the four of them and was now married to Roger. What? Troy said. You were the guy every girl in school wanted to end up with. She kissed her husband on the cheek. No offense, baby, but can I interrupt your friend's pity party? Roger shrugged and gestured to Troy with a wink. When you left Massey MacArthur after your injury, many of us tried to be your comfort romance in the hopes that one of us would get you. She shook her head and collected the empty beer bottles. Troy Picker, the sweetest, funniest guy in school who practically ruled the room the moment he walked in. Do you really think we chose you as prom king and valedictorian out of pity? Okay, you now have a bit of a belly and a slight limp. You still have bedroom-colored eyes and arms and shoulders like a blasted elephant. If I weren't madly in love with my husband, I'd tell you to ditch the cheerleader and hit on me yourself. Damn it, I'd sleep with you right now. In the back room, if Roger wouldn't mind. She winked at her husband. She's not kidding, Roger said, winking back. The only reason she agreed to go to the prom with me was because I promised to put in a good word for her with you. Luckily, Celeste was with you all night, and I was able to win her heart. The thing is, if any of us were to end up with a trophy wife, it would be you. Okay, maybe it won't last, and some hot quarterback making $10 million a year will steal it from you, but I'm sure it will be an exciting journey while it lasts. The next day, Troy called Rose in the morning and asked to meet somewhere quiet to talk. The fact that she didn't want to have lunch together didn't exactly reassure Troy. She was wearing glasses, a sweater, and ripped jeans, and looked as beautiful as always. They walked and had a small conversation, but there was a lot of awkwardness. Look, Rose, I've never told anyone this, but basically, I'm a liar, Troy finally said. Fine. She crossed her arms with the same appraising look she had when they first met. I always look cool, I joke, but in reality I'm nervous as hell. Troy shook his head. I know it looks calm and confident, but that's not what I feel. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I am a slightly overweight person who was terrified before asking you out. I always hoped that I would end up with someone as sweet and beautiful as you are now. It was a long shot, but I hoped that I could. joke, and pretend to be confident enough for it to work. Never, not once, have I imagined myself in a relationship with an NFL cheerleader who looks like she could be a model. Troy, I told you. This is the real me, Rose said, gesturing to herself. This, not how I dress and pretend to be at work. And you're nervous. Do you think this is any different? From others, I shake every time before leaving the tunnel. It was even worse on Monday because I knew you were there. Do you know how many players get so nervous before games that they feel sick before leaving the locker room? Yes, I'm attracted to males, but it's not how you feel, it's how you act. Honestly, the fact that you also have a sensitive side makes you even more attractive. Troy, I was physically attracted to you the moment you looked into my eyes with coffee dripping everywhere. The more I get to know you, the more you become the type of guy I want to be with. If we have half that chemistry in bed, like with kissing, I don't want to let you go. She smiled and took his hand. Are you serious? I seriously want to have sex tonight with a cute guy who was confident enough to pick me up and walk into an interview with a suit covered in coffee. She gently tugged at his hand to return to his car. Unless you want to sleep with a professional cheerleader, of course. Rose offered to go to her house, although her neighbors were at home and the walls were thin. Since she had taken a taxi to the park, she jumped into Troy's car to go to his place. As soon as they were inside his apartment, they made love. After that, everything went quickly, and Troy hardly went a day without spending time with Rose. Everything was going so well, except that it bothered him when the Packers cheerleader calendar came out with Rose posing in only a thong and covering her breasts. Other guys Troy didn't even know asked him to get her to sign him, which, of course, she did if he asked. Also, after the release of the calendar, Rose began to be recognized more often in public places. When they looked at Troy, he felt like he was being evaluated like, how did a guy like him get her? And was usually in a bad mood. Rose always seemed understanding at times like these, and her little glance or wink usually reminded him that he didn't have to prove anything to her, and that calmed him down. At the end of the winter term, Rose stayed with him almost every night in his tiny apartment. Troy once remarked that if she officially moved, they could afford a better place together. Rose was evasive, and only after Troy's insistence did she admit that her father was very conservative despite leaving her mother for his secretary and would not approve of them living together without marriage. Troy considered her answer, and then over the next month he sold some of the rare sports memorabilia he had collected since elementary school and bought what he thought was the perfect engagement ring for Rose. Meeting with her father to get permission was difficult, especially when he seemed much more arrogant than her mother. With Ryan Peters, as he insisted on being called, was not what Troy looked like. Mr. Porty Peters, he insisted, was a very successful mill owner and expected his daughters to marry someone as financially successful as him. Surprisingly, he wasn't surprised and seemed happy that Troy was going to make an honest woman out of Rose, and even insisted that he be called Ryan after that. Troy was so nervous the day he planned to propose. His palms were sticky with sweat. To compensate, he joked more than usual and got to the point where Rose started to get a little annoyed when she wanted to talk seriously about their plans for the summer when they both had no classes. When he finally got down on one knee and proposed, the restaurant went silent. Rose's eyes widened and filled with tears. She frowned and said, "Sorry, Troy, I can't answer right now. Can you give me some time?" She left without finishing her food, and he didn't hear from her for 2 weeks. He called her apartment, but her roommate said she wasn't there, and they didn't know when she'd be back. Almost 2 weeks later, Troy was awakened by a knock on his apartment door. Rose stood there, looking stunning in a skirt and top, frowning. "I'm so sorry, Troy. You caught me off guard. I really didn't expect it and didn't know what to say. I knew you'd only ask once, so I needed to make sure I made the right decision," Rose said. "Can I come in?" Troy frowned, thinking he knew what would happen next, and invited her inside. "My sister and I suddenly went to Vegas. I stayed with her friends, and it gave me time to figure out a few things," Rose said. I couldn't help but think it was an impulsive decision because I said I couldn't move. I know you love me, and I started to fall in love with you too. Troy waited for a but when Rose shook her head and shrugged. It's no secret that despite how well things were going for us, we had some problems. Problems that are not a good foundation for a marriage. Can I show you something? Troy nodded and Rose turned around, lifting her skirt. She had a fresh tattoo of a rose. Troy shrugged, not sure what this had to do with her refusing his proposal, and simply said, "That's nice." "Cute," Rose said, a little upset. "Cute? Don't you know what that means?" Troy shook his head, thinking that the rose tattoo now meant something. "Troy Picker, it's a visible tattoo," Rose said with wide eyes before rolling her eyes. "You're dumb. That means I can't be on the team because it's a clear violation of the rules. I'm quitting. Cheerleading for you." "That means—" He never had time to finish the sentence. They made love. "Yes, yes. 25,000 times yes," Rose said, admiring the diamond. "It's perfect, but for our wedding rings, I would like matching white silver rings without diamonds. When I become Mrs. Picker, I don't want a sparkly ring. I only need you and the baby in my belly." With the blessing of their parents, the two found a large apartment to live together. During his senior year, Troy felt enormous pressure to not only do well in school, but also to get a job in a competitive industry. Wanting a family and a mortgage, he didn't want to be a freelance writer, especially since Rose had one more year of school left. It turned out that he had nothing to worry about. Duncan, his boss at his part-time job, already had an entry-level reporting position waiting for him when he graduated with honors. Duncan even attended the ceremony, excited to meet Troy's family, especially Rose, who he asked for an autograph on his old Packers cheerleader calendar. They married in a big ceremony that summer, almost a year to the day Rose accepted Troy's proposal. Many of her old cheerleader friends were in attendance, and even a few Packers players who turned heads. With Troy's encouragement and less time to distract herself from her studies, Rose completed her degree and found several companies willing to hire her. Given her interest in sports and her experience, she chose a public relations company that works with several professional and semi-professional teams. Soon after, the couple was able to afford a mortgage on a beautiful 4-room home that both couldn't wait to fill with children. A year into the job, Rose became pregnant and began planning her year-long maternity leave, while Troy began to build a reputation as one of the city's most up-and-coming sports journalists, even making occasional appearances on radio talk shows. His confidence, humor, and charisma attracted both athletes and fans. Unfortunately, everything couldn't be sunshine and rainbows. During the last trimester of her pregnancy, Rose experienced serious complications and was in danger of losing her baby due to a birth defect. Both Rose and their son were at risk, and doctors had previously recommended a cesarean section almost 4 weeks early. There were many tears from both parents and grandparents as they waited to see if there would be any complications in the development of Brady Jonas Picker, who spent the first month of his life in the neonatal unit. Troy was allowed to continue submitting opinion pieces so he could spend as much time as possible with Rose and Brady. The day the doctors cleared Brady to go home, declaring him normal, was one of the happiest days of Troy's life. He hugged Rose so hard that he hurt her ribs. Unfortunately, with the good news about their son's health came the bad news that Rose could no longer get pregnant. The doctor gave Troy 2 options: abstinence or a medical procedure. Of course, Troy chose the second option and accepted his loving wife's teasing as he walked awkwardly. As time passed, Troy fell more and more in love with his beautiful wife, who, in his opinion, looked even better as she became a mature woman. Both continued to exercise regularly, although Troy never lost the beer belly in front of his abs. Even though she was a source of confidence for him, Rose was also a source of insecurity when Troy saw her getting attention. That nagging thought that she was too good for him never left him. 7 years later, Troy Picker was almost as famous as the athletes he wrote about. Duncan had long since retired, but Dan Reed, a writer who had started a little before Troy, became chief sports editor. Dan and Troy were a bit competitive, but that softened when Dan realized Troy was happy with his place. In addition, Troy not only wrote, but also regularly appeared on the radio during every Packers game, appeared on television sports shows, and often hosted charity events. While out shopping with his family, Troy would often be recognized and engaged in conversations, while Rose stood proudly in the background. Rose was no longer a famous face, but no less successful. She had a healthy client list, and no longer had to look for new talent in town. They came to her. The only downside to their success was that they spent less time with Brady and each other than they both would have liked. However, they continued to have weekly dates and maintained a healthy sex life. Barring illness or other medical reasons, neither of them has ever refused sex with the other. It wasn't ideal, but Troy couldn't imagine his life being happier. A big blow to Troy's life occurred as a result of a game that everyone in Wisconsin simply called the game. The Packers were playing in Philadelphia, and if they had won, they would have made the playoffs. If they had lost, the season would have been over. With 20 seconds left in the fourth quarter, the Packers were up by 5 points, and the Eagles had 4th and 10 on their own 15-yard lines. The Eagles' quarterback found himself in a tight spot and ended up throwing a short pass that was wide of the first down to a receiver who was being covered by Cameron Baxter, a 10-year veteran linebacker playing one of his final seasons. Baxter could have just let the guy catch the ball, knock it down, and the game would have been over. But for some reason, Baxter backed off and opted for a hard high hit to the receiver as soon as the ball was caught. However, Baxter got his timing wrong and received a passive interference penalty for hitting it early. Baxter then lost his cool, hit the receiver, threw his helmet, and continued to curse at the officials. Several of his teammates tried to calm him down, even his coach, but Baxter never calmed down. He was pulled off the field and taken to the locker room by 2 offensive linemen after accumulating 55 yards of penalties on 1 violation. Sure enough, on the next play, the Eagles' quarterback connected with a wide receiver for a touchdown, ending the Packers' playoff hopes. The next day at work, Dan wanted to talk to Troy about his scathing article about how Baxter cost the Packers their playoff spot. "Seriously, Troy, I really think you should tone it down a little," Dan said in his pleasant but really commanding tone. "Baxter is a pillar in this community, all his public appearances and off-season charity work. I know him personally. He's a really great guy who just made a mistake. A veteran who should have known better. I mean, unless he gets fired, which I fully expect, he'll still be suspended for most of next season. Pushing the referee during a seizure. He's already leaving. And just imagine. Young guys who lost bonuses in the playoffs because of him. Okay, I will write an article praising all he has done for this team and community when he is asked to resign. But I'm not going to soften how much his selfishness cost him. This is a community," Troy said passionately, and Dan knew his reporter well enough to just let it slide. "Don't say I didn't warn you about the possible backlash to this." Troy laughed. "Do you think I'm worried?" No one publicly objected to Troy's opinion of Baxter. He even apologized to the team and staff for his actions the next day as rumors of his retirement began to spread. Troy was surprised when Rose returned home from work the day after his article was published. She didn't agree with her at all, and she watched the game on TV. "Baxter was wrong, but you really should have escalated the blame more by pointing out how much it cost his teammates in bonuses," Rose said. "That was very cruel of you." "Can you imagine him?" Troy asked coldly. "No, but he's really getting crucified on social media. Even a few of his sponsors have abandoned him. He has a family. I thought you would take that into account before attacking him. So you don't represent him. Maybe you'll let me do my job and I won't interfere with yours. You know that everything I wrote is true. Just because some reporters turn a blind eye to it because of all his fundraising for a children's hospital doesn't mean I'll do the same. As I told Dan, when he retires, I'll write a touching tribute to everything he did before the game that will make even him cry." Rose shook her head and didn't mention it again, but Troy could tell she was angry. He'd criticized players before even the ones she represented, and she hadn't reacted so strongly. Okay, that was a strong attack even for him. Baxter was one of her favorite players over the years. Rose has had his number on her Packers jersey since they started dating in college. Troy brushed it off as fan loyalty and expected her to get over it. Baxter surprised everyone by not retiring and even demanding a trade. About a week later, Troy was on Picker's Picks, a segment on a television news show where he again criticized the veteran player and doubted the Packers would get much for him. Troy ended with an article praising Baxter's charity work, then adding that this should be his full-time job. On the way out to his car, Troy was surprised when Baxter jumped out of the Porsche right outside the station doors. Troy was glad there were enough people around and knew Baxter wouldn't try anything because an assault charge would be the end of his career. "You think you're so smart, talking randomly, hiding behind your press pass," Baxter growled. "You have no right to talk about what happens on the field. You're just a fat armchair football expert." Although Troy was a little nervous on the inside that Baxter might hit, he knew enough to not let a guy like that get the better of him. "Well, considering I've been doing this almost as long as you and still hold several defensive records at Westmount High School, I think I'm doing more than just playing the expert. You wasted your season, Cameron. Just accept it and move on. I'm just doing my job. You should have done the same." "You damn fat pig. You can't talk to me like that." Cameron looked down at him, then smiled. "No, I changed my mind. Just wait. You will find out what happens to those who cross my path." Troy shook his head and walked past Baxter without a word. When he returned home, he debated whether to tell Rose what had happened to get her opinion on whether or not he should take the words as a threat. In the end, he decided not to bother her. There were a lot of people around and Baxter was just trying to save face. Anything he does will be a nail in the lid of his career. 2 weeks later, Rose's end-of-year party was approaching. It was held at her boss's mansion, and there were always many celebrities among the guests. Troy didn't care since he had attended the last 3 with her, but Rose could dress like she was for an awards ceremony and feel special. She was also always in the mood for love when they returned home. As in previous years, Troy had arranged a day off with Dan in advance, so he would be free that evening. Football was his main sport, so considering the Packers' season was over, it shouldn't have been a big deal. However, this year the party was more important to Rose than in previous years. She checked with Troy several times that he was definitely free that evening. She showed off her dress for that evening to Troy and little Brady several times. Troy had to admit she looked just as stunning as she did in hers. Cheerleader from all those years ago. Troy was about to leave an hour early as planned to pick up his tuxedo and get ready when Dan called him into the office. "Picker, I'm sorry, but you have to cover the Gamblers game today," Dan said. "Are you kidding me? A junior hockey game? Send Darla or Mitch," Troy said, laughing. Dan frowned. "Do I look like I'm kidding? I told you there would be a backlash to that article. You pissed off a few board members, and now they're making my life difficult. So, Kevin is sick, and I need someone to cover that one." The game was unusual for her. You'll cover it and look like a reporter interested in local sports, not like the guy who cracked on a public hero. "Rose and I have something I agreed he was talking about today's day off a few weeks ago," Troy said. "What if I refuse? You'll be out of work, and you'll actually find out how people reacted to your article." "Dan, come on. I'll fix everything, but not tonight." Troy began to worry. "Should I escort you out for dismissal or give you a pass to today's game?" Dan crossed his arms over his chest. Troy had never seen him so persistent and knew he wasn't bluffing. Troy was dreading the trip home. When he entered the house, Rose was standing in the kitchen in her dressing gown and curlers, preparing Brady's dinner. "Con, where is your tuxedo?" asked Rose. When he showed her the press pass, her face tensed. Troy tried to talk about it, but she didn't say a word. This continued until he had to leave. In fact, she got even angrier and ignored him completely. When she didn't even respond to his, "Bye, sweetie, good night," Troy snapped before leaving. Okay, next time I'll let myself get fired because your party is more important than us having two incomes. Troy never liked hockey as much as baseball or football, but he got the job done. The players won, and he prepared an article before leaving. When he returned home, the house was empty as Brady was scheduled to be taken to Rose's mother's before the party. Troy considered sneaking into the party since it was only 10, but decided to just have a few drinks and wait for Rose to get home. He was almost asleep watching TV on the couch when he heard the door open. When he saw her in that dress, with her makeup and hair done, Troy thought she looked as good as any actress on the red carpet. "Baby, you look amazing," Troy said. "You can't call me that yet," Rose hissed, sounding rather drunk. "Look, I had no choice. You know that sometimes I can't choose tasks." "Damn, you ruined our evening with your ego." With these words, she burst into tears and ran past him into the bedroom. He heard the door lock. "Rose, come on. I'll fix everything," Troy said as he knocked on the door. When there was no answer other than the sound of the shower starting, he sighed and prepared to sleep on the couch for the first time in years. Even though it was late at night, by 6 in the morning Troy was already far away. He stood up and saw that the master bedroom door was open. Rose must have come out after her shower, and he was already asleep. He hoped it was an apology for being so irritable to him while just doing his job. Troy decided to check his work email on his phone while he drank his coffee. Kevin emailed him, presumably to thank him for covering the hockey game for him. Before checking this out, one email was sent early in the morning that caught Troy's attention. It was a weird email address that usually goes straight to the spam folder. The theme was Troy. He opened it, and there was a video with text. "Told you not to cross my path." As soon as Troy started the video, he paused it and grabbed his headphones. It was a video taken on a phone in a luxurious bedroom. Troy recognized his wife as soon as the video started, not because of the dress she wore to her event, but because of the faded rose tattoo on her lower left buttock. She slept with Baxter. Troy bit his lip and almost slammed his fist on the table, but he stopped wanting to wake Rose. Instead, he knew he was in no mood to deal with this, especially when his son was involved. However, in his mind, his marriage had already broken down. He checked her purse and noticed that her phone was blocked, which was unusual for her. He heard Rose snoring when he returned to the bedroom, as was usual after she had been drinking. Troy deftly pulled the suitcase out of the closet and began quickly filling it with clean clothes that would last him a week or two. As he walked away with it, he noticed that Rose looked at him with half-lidded eyes. Troy frowned, waved goodbye, and left without making a sound. Before he left home, he debated whether to call Rose's mother to say goodbye to Brady, feeling terrible about leaving his son without a father. Ultimately, he decided that his son would hear him upset, and that would be worse than just seeing Rose if she was upset at all. Troy also considered leaving a note, but instead opened his email on his phone and forwarded the video to his wife with the text, "Get a lawyer. We're done." His niece Janessa answered the door in her pajamas. "Uncle Troy, are you here for breakfast?" "Of course, honey," Troy said and picked her up for a hug. "Aunt Rose and Dylan are here too?" "No, not this time," Troy replied with tears in his eyes. Jason walked towards the hallway, looked at Troy, and frowned. Troy put on a brave face as he ate pancakes with Lisa, Jason, and Janessa, but his older brother looked worried. Jason led Troy downstairs after breakfast while Lisa and Janessa cleaned up the kitchen. "How bad is it?" Jason asked with a serious face. "She cheated on me for I don't know how long. I'm divorcing her," Troy said, shrugging and collapsing onto the couch. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Jason asked. Troy opened the video on his phone and handed it to his brother. Jason made a disgusted face. "Damn, I don't want to see this. She's my sister-in-law." "Soon no longer. She's still the mother of my only nephew and a good friend of my wife." "Damn, this is terrible. I think the guy she cheated with sent this." Troy chuckled. "That's right. Cameron Bloody Baxter, proving to me that I shouldn't have written the article. I doubt Rose knew she was being filmed, but Baxter clearly hinted that this wasn't the first time. How could I be so stupid? Okay, she was having a flirtation, but don't do anything stupid. What did she say about it? Troy looked at him and blinked. Do you really think I want to discuss this with her now? Do you want to know the worst part? After she got home, she had the nerve to still be mad at me for missing her precious party. I know you hate them, but maybe you should have gone. Troy exploded. You think I was deliberately trying to piss her off? I had to work. Dan was a complete asshole and threatened to fire me if I didn't cover a hockey game because Kevin was sick. Besides, if that hadn't happened, who knows how many times they would cheat behind my back without knowing it. I should send Kevin flowers as a thank you. Jason sighed. I know you're all pissed because it's still fresh, but you'll really need to talk to her eventually. It's best to wait until you calm down. And please don't do anything out of anger, which you may regret later. Even after this, I'm sure you still love her, and I'm sure she loves you. Well, thank you, damn it, Oprah, Troy said, and then closed his eyes. Damn, I left my laptop at home. I can't go back for it now. Jason pointed to the door. You can use the one there. This is the one we give you to use, Janessa, so no visits to adult sites. And I assume you've packed your suitcase. The guest bedroom is yours for as long as you want. Troy quickly checked his emails. There was no response from Rose yet, so she was probably still asleep. He was surprised to receive a letter from Kevin complaining that Troy was trying to take his place. It turned out that the guy was not sick at all. Dan simply decided to demonstrate his power. Troy assured Kevin that he had no desire to switch to hockey, explaining that Dan was just trying to teach him a lesson. Troy looked around the area, which was filled with a variety of sports memorabilia, including several signed jerseys, all of which Troy had helped get for his brother. He knew he had to do something, or he would go crazy. He went upstairs. His brother and family were in the kitchen. Troy walked up to Janessa with a big smile. Hey, honey, want to go sledding? Oh, yeah, replied his niece with a wide smile. Who else is going? Dylan. No, honey, Lisa said, giving Troy a sympathetic look. I think only you and your uncle will go. Let's go put on your winter suit. It was weird doing something with Janessa without Dylan. They were very close. They spent 3 hours on the slide. He invited her to have some hot chocolate, and then they went to his brother's house. Jason looked excited as his daughter told stories of deadly dangers and her impressive sledding skills. Lisa smiled with a forced smile. Troy felt that Rose must have talked to her. As he expected, as soon as Jason took Janessa to warm up after the cold and wet clothes, Lisa caught Troy to talk. Troy, I'm so sorry for what you're going through, but you can't think this is the end of your marriage. What if someone sent you a video of Jay sleeping with some incredibly hot athlete that you couldn't match physically? How would you feel? Troy replied coldly. Lisa was silent for a moment. Well, first of all, I wouldn't watch it. Just knowing would be enough. I would want to hit her and kill my husband before I calmed down. Once that happens, I would make him understand well and make him do everything possible so that we can survive this. Troy laughed coldly. Troy, I work in a counseling office, as you know. Cheating is much more common than you think, and many couples actually work through it and go through it. No matter who cheats, man or woman, it's all the same. The key to stopping the behavior that led to the cheating and trying to rebuild trust is if both people still love each other. Considering how confused Rose is, I can tell you that she loves you very much. She really doesn't want a divorce. She loves me, but not enough. Please lower your voice, Janessa. You don't need to hear such talk, Lisa said sternly. Troy, please take some time to calm down and really think about this. Yeah, but was it ever just the two of us? Troy said coldly. Lisa knew it was useless to argue and left him alone. Troy tried to distract himself by watching sports on TV or chatting with his brother. He hated the way Jason and Lisa looked at him like he was a wounded lamb. Okay, he was hurt by what she did, but he wasn't going to give her or Baxter any satisfaction by crying. He was angry as hell and wasn't going to put up with her actions. Letting his anger build, Troy began to remember every late work day, dinner with clients, or time he was away covering a game. There were so many opportunities for her to run away and meet her lover or lovers, and Troy suspected nothing. Probably because he had equal opportunities and even had a sports fan flirt with him from time to time, but Troy never once thought of crossing any lines because of how important Rose was to him. Of course, there was also Vegas. After he proposed to her, Rose disappeared for 2 weeks in Vegas with her sister, where she came back with that damn tattoo. Was it really to sort things out like she said, or was it a big celebration before the wedding? Now Troy began to look at it differently. After dinner, Troy was working on Jason's computer in the basement when he got an idea. Earlier that day, he locked Rose's phone and saw that she had sent 8 emails to his work account and a private message to his Twitter. He deleted them all without reading them. He fully expected the cliches. It was just sex. It didn't mean anything, or I love you. Ironically, the only reason he even had a Twitter account was because Rose insisted, so that he helps his brand. Troy rarely used it except for brief thoughts about some news surrounding the Packers, but he still had about 250,000 subscribers. Troy decided to please these followers. Troy saved the video to his desktop and started a new tweet with it as an attachment. He typed, "That's why I'll soon be alone. Are there any beauties who want to help get through this?" Troy looked at it, very proud of himself, and was about to click tweet when suddenly the computer turned off. He turned to see Jason holding a fork in one hand. "Damn it, Troy," Jason said sternly in a low voice. "I told you not to do anything stupid." And I listened. "That tweet was just brilliant," Troy said. "To hell with jokes, this is serious." "Rose is on Lisa's phone," Jason said. "Tell that bitch." Troy began gesturing with his finger. "She wants you to talk to Brady. Kid is really upset and thinks you're mad at him." Jason crossed his arms over his chest. "Go talk to him, then come back, and we can discuss this stupid trick." Troy didn't like giving his older but weaker brother the pleasure of bossing him around, but Jay was right that he should talk to Brady. Upstairs, Lisa was holding the phone with a cold face. "Okay, he's here. Give it to Brady." Troy found it difficult not to cry while talking to his 7-year-old son. The worst thing was to lie to him that everything was fine and that he would be home before he knew it. This was much worse than lying about Santa or the Easter Bunny. Troy thought he calmed the boy when Brady said, "Mom says you left because she hurt your feelings so much. Talk to her and sorry so you can come home, please, Daddy. Here's Mom." Troy hung up, cursing under his breath, and roughly handed the phone back to Lisa. He walked downstairs to where Jason was waiting with an open bottle of whiskey, an ice bucket, and 2 glasses. "Not very good," Jason said as he poured 2 glasses. "That bitch was just using my son to manipulate me," Troy said coldly, taking a sip from his glass and then explaining what Brady had said. "You're wrong about that," Jason said. "He's still a child, of course. He'll want his parents to make peace. And what did you want Rose to tell him? I don't think she could have explained what was going on better. You're too bitter about this. Now you're completely biased about everything Rose. Why the hell are you taking her side? You didn't even think that we would get married." Jason snorted. "Of course I'm on your side, but I'm also on my nephew's side. I would, damn it, expect the same from you if, God forbid, something happened between me and Lisa." Troy rolled his eyes. "Yeah, you're definitely in my corner, bro. Just a little more in my corner, and you'll be painting the Eiffel Tower with Baxter and my future ex-wife." "For once, shut up with your stupid jokes and listen," Jason said sternly. "First of all, what you were trying to pull out by releasing that video was a huge mistake, and you would know it if you thought. Obviously, do you think all you can do is humiliate your wife and give you some kind of payment? Once it goes viral, it's forever, and you can't fix it. Do you want your son to live with all this? What about the Baxter kids? Not to mention, it would completely ruin Rose's life. Yes, you're mad as hell, but don't write crap that you don't care about. Do you think she knew she was being filmed? Okay, she cheated. But do you really think she would ever want you to see her like this? Is it Rose the fact that she is to blame for hurting you kills her almost as much, as well as knowing you two are probably done? So, you're right, we're done, Troy said. Keep with that approach, and it will stay that way, Jason said. Suppose you get divorced and go your separate ways. Then there's Brady, who will need both of you in his life. How the hell could you coexist as parents after you write this? You may hate her after this, but you still need to respect her as the mother of your son. Okay, the video was a stupid idea, but I don't need to spend any more time on it than discussing Brady, Troy said. Is this what we're talking about? Jason said, shaking his head. You're a grown man, not some high school punk. Why do you fall for such stupid ridicule? He beat you and won. I'm sorry, but it takes more courage to face the pain of what your wife did and give her a chance to explain herself than to just walk away. How do you imagine me sharing a bed with her after watching this video without feeling humiliated and thinking I'm just a consolation prize? The end of our marriage isn't what makes me weaker than him. It's proof that he could have slept with my wife just because he wanted to, and she liked it more than sex with me. That's why I'm leaving. Damn you for accusing me of this. I know I've lost, and I don't see any point in doing anything other than accepting it. Jason sighed, shook his head, and left Troy with the bottle. Troy didn't try to contact Rose or Brady all weekend. At work on Monday, Dan suddenly exerted his authority by ordering Troy to cover a minor winter festival in another city. It was a trivial task that Martha usually received as the most junior sports journalist. It had nothing to do with sports. Dan showed his power, proving that he was in charge. Troy accepted this without much argument, but decided to talk to him if the next task wasn't worthy of his level. The good news was that Troy was going out of town for 4 days, and Rose didn't know where he was. The bad news was that he was left alone in the hotel room, thinking about all the bad things in his marriage and all the other ways Rose might have cheated on him. On the 4th day of the festival, there was a big dance, and the drinking was flowing. Troy decided to give it up and decided to have a good time. He ended up not remembering exactly what a good time he had, but he woke up early in the morning with a very young woman in his bed. Troy thanked God when he learned that the girl was of age. She wasn't ugly, but she wasn't anywhere near Rose. She also regretted what happened that morning, mainly because of the possible pregnancy. Troy explained to her that he could not have children due to the procedure. As he showered after she left, Troy began to feel guilty. He cheated for the first time in his life. Yes, his marriage was on the brink, but it was not over. It wasn't revenge, at least not that he remembered. He was drunk. He knew he needed to get tested for diseases and decided never to tell Rose. As sure as he was at that moment that he didn't want to be married to her, Troy also knew that he still loved her and didn't want to hurt her anymore out of spite. His phone had been off for most of the night, so Troy turned it on to check his messages before the 40-minute drive home. He had 20 messages from Rose's sister, Rose's mother, Jason and Lisa, and several voicemails. He checked the first message from his brother and hurried to pack his things to leave. The text read, "Rose is in the hospital. There will be an operation. This is serious. You need to be there. Say, Mary." Troy drove 30 minutes to the hospital, but it felt like much more time had passed. The message from Jason came at 11 in the evening, that is, 8 hours ago. He practically ran to the front desk where he asked where his wife was. She was in the recovery room at the Women's Health Center. As he walked past the waiting room, he saw Lily, Rose's sister, Lisa, and Petunia, Rose's mother. Only Lisa noticed him, but she made no attempt to speak. The nurse stopped him as he approached Rose's room. Troy said he was her husband, and the nurse said he would have to wait before coming in. A few seconds later, Troy was relieved to see Dr. Bisa Patel, who had been her doctor for many years, including during complications with Brady's birth. "Troy, can we talk for a minute?" Dr. Patel asked in his usual calm, quiet voice. Troy nodded, and they walked into the exam room next to the nurse's station. "Dr. Patel closed the door and sighed. Troy, I think you remember after Rose gave birth, I explained the seriousness of her condition. I gave you two options to prevent further complications. Troy nodded. Of course, I went through my procedure almost immediately. Rose has now given me permission to discuss this with you, and you are technically still her medical representative. Technically? Dr. Shea Patel frowned. Her mother began filing paperwork to change her medical representative, alleging abuse. She also asked the nurses not to allow you to see your wife until a restraining order was obtained. What the hell? Dr. Patel smiled. I think she doesn't fully understand what's going on and just wants to protect her daughter. Rose supported the change of medical representative, but I think the expression showing off refers to the conversation about the restraining order. You are, of course, allowed to see her. Now remember what I said about two options. From what Rose said, I know that you are already aware that your wife was having sex with a man who could have children. She realized the next day that her life was potentially under threat and bought what is called a pill at the pharmacy. For most women, it is relatively safe, but complications arose with her problems. Perhaps, in order not to reveal her infidelity, Rose was silent and hoped that it would stop on its own. Eventually, her sister noticed how bad it was, and by the time we examined her, she had blood clots and a severe infection that had already spread to other organs. We had to give a blood transfusion. We are optimistic that she will recover completely, but her life is still at risk due to the infection that has spread to her kidneys. She will have to stay here for a while and get plenty of rest. Okay, Troy said hoarsely, so can I see her? Yes, she asked you to. Let the head nurse know if any of the other nurses are taking her mother's words about the restraining order too seriously. Troy felt sick when he entered Rose's room, knowing that he had slept with another woman while his wife was undergoing life-saving surgery. The room was full of noisy machines and hoses connected to Rose, and she looked paler than Troy had ever seen. Rose saw him, and her face lit up for a moment before her lips pursed, and she began to cry in a hoarse voice. I'm sorry, so sorry. Hush, Troy said, sitting down next to her and taking her bandaged hand. Just relax and get better. The rest can wait. Please come home and stay with Brady, Rose continued to cry. Your brother is with him now. Just come home and be with him. When I get out, I'll stay with my mom. I know you don't want to be married to me anymore. Rose, just relax. We'll talk about this later, Troy said. Mom is here for me. Your son needs you. Please, Troy, just go. Troy almost felt pity when he saw the look on her face, as if she had already accepted that it was all over. For some strange reason, this made him feel even more guilty about what happened in the hotel room. Troy nodded and left the room, silently saying that he loved her. Rose simply frowned and nodded, continuing to cry. Get out of here, you bastard. You did it, Petunia growled as he walked past the waiting room. Lisa jumped up and stood face to face with Rose's mother. Don't talk to Troy like that. Rose got herself into this situation. It's not his fault. What the hell isn't it? Said Petunia. I thought you were her friend. You're on his side. Mom. Lily tried to mediate. This is not the time. I know he hurt my daughter. He slept with someone and gave her something, and now she's here and he's gone back to some girl. Lisa tried to push Rose's mother to do this. How dare you talk about my brother like that? Your daughter is the one who cheated. At this point, it seemed that security intervention would be required. Troy debated whether to help keep the two women away from each other, but instead texted Jason to warn him that he was coming and Lisa would likely be kicked out of the hospital. Hearing her defend him and call him brother rather than brother-in-law was nice. He didn't blame Petunia. It was obvious that Rose hadn't explained to her why she was really there and why he had left. Troy took time off from work and spent most of the next week making up for lost time with Brady. It was difficult at first, but children don't hold grudges like adults. Lily stopped by to take Brady and visit his mom on Tuesday. She was quite cold towards Troy and said that Rose didn't want him there. She at least told him that her body was fighting the infection and she would hopefully be discharged next week. He also learned that Lisa, Jason, and any other members of his family were also not welcome to visit Rose. When Brady returned, Lily had a strange look on her face. Brady was so excited and told Troy that some football players visited his mom with flowers. He met her favorite player. As Brady ran to his room, Lily came closer and spoke to Troy in a quiet voice. "Listen, it was just bad timing and wasn't planned. He was leaving when we arrived. He's very sorry and he would never want to hurt her. And look, Rose just told me what really happened. I knew she was so mad at you before she went to the party. I assumed you cheated, and that calm was just revenge." "Well, it's nice that you think that way of me," Troy said coldly. "I know it's not an excuse, but you used that pathetic excuse to just walk away from an evening that was so important to her." Lily shook her head. "She was given a tip that she would win the Employee of the Year award, and you ignored it because you hate spending time with her coworkers." "Is that what she thinks? I told her that my boss was mad at me for insulting Baxter and made me cover a stupid hockey game as punishment. He said he'd fire me on the spot if I refused." Troy rolled his eyes, tired of his job becoming an excuse for what happened. "After what she did, there's no point in continuing that lie." Lily said, "Rose called your boss after you got home and tried to explain how important this evening was to her. He told her the truth, that you asked to work that evening. You convinced him to give the task to someone else. The fact that you lied and deliberately let her down was the reason for her anger." "What? Dan, that bastard, said the same thing to the guy who was supposed to cover the game, only he told me that the guy was sick. Lily, I have witnesses in the office who heard Dan tell me to get a pass to the game or be escorted out of the building." She crossed her arms looking skeptical. "Why would he do that?" "To hurt me. Look, I'm telling the truth. What could I gain by lying about something like that? Like you said, it doesn't matter now after what she did. Can you please tell Rose that we'll talk, when would it be ready, and that I had no choice but to work that night?" Lily shrugged and nodded. The next day Troy received no news. He considered calling Rose's room, but decided that he had already offered to talk and would wait for her. He was cleaning up while Brady played with cars in the backyard when he heard a knock on the door. He looked and saw a Porsche in the driveway. Troy sighed and saw Cameron Baxter standing in front of his door. Troy opened the door and, without saying a word, hit the linebacker. Baxter responded, "Damn, you're tougher than you look. I'll give it to you for Rosie, but hit me again, pick her, and I'll hit you back." "What do you need?" Troy growled. Baxter raised his hands in defense. "Just to say a few things. First, to sincerely apologize for what I did. I lost my cool and acted on pure emotion just like in that game. I want to say that I went after Rose that night, not the other way around. I knew that she's there without you, and that you're writing another article about me, and, okay, I didn't care about your marriage, but I would never intentionally jeopardize her health. I'm sorry, and I already told Rose that if she sues me, I won't fight so her name doesn't get into the press. It was my fault, not Rosie's, okay? That's why I'm also paying for her medical expenses." Troy looked closely at Baxter's face. He believed that he was repentant, at least enough that Troy wasn't going to hit him again. Troy was silent for some time. "So Rose told you I wouldn't be there?" Baxter laughed. "Hell no. Haven't talked to her in years. Not since she left the cheerleading squad. Tried to keep in touch, but you know how women feel about their exes." "Then who told you?" "Your boss, Dan Reed, and I have known each other for a long time. He warned me about your first article and about the second one you wrote after our meeting at the station. He told me that day that you chose this task yourself, and Rose was very angry. He offered to hit on her at the party after she had a drink as a good revenge. He even gave me your email if I wanted to make fun of you, which I did. Look, I'm really sorry again, and please give her mine. Best wishes." Baxter turned and walked away, rubbing his chin and chuckling. Troy shook his head as he closed the door. He knew he had two important calls to make. 3 hours later, Troy was waiting by Dan Reed's car in the newspaper parking lot. "Troy, how's Rose? I just found out." Dan started when Troy punched him. "What the heck?" "What the hell is that a valid question?" Troy growled. "Why did you do this? Ruined my marriage and endangered my wife's life." "I know. The assignment, the lie to me, the lie to Rose, and the lie to Baxter. You set up everything to seduce her. Why, Dan, every lie will cost you a tooth." "Tell me, Dan, why?" "I heard that you were going to be lured away, or rather, the advice was heard by a media company in Chicago. To keep you, they were thinking of promoting you to sports editor and moving me to HR. I don't know anything about HR. It was essentially a resignation. I didn't know for sure that Baxter would succeed. I knew they were dating briefly when she was in cheerleading, and he still had feelings for her. I was just hoping that something would happen between them that night that would unsettle you enough to make an argument that you weren't ready for it." Editorial position. "You're a stupid asshole," Troy hissed. "I wouldn't want your job even with a promotion, and I would never take a job in another city. Did you ruin my marriage because of this? You put my wife's life in jeopardy. Because of this? Yeah, I guess I should have just pissed off the cold-blooded picker instead. You're fired, and I'll file you for assault." Dan started laughing. "Think again," said the elderly voice. Duncan emerged from the shadows where he had been hiding. "Duncan, Dan began. "When Troy told me what was going on, I thought it might have something to do with the conversation we had with you," Duncan said calmly. "Admit it, you were never good at your job. HR could be better. For you. You understand that by admitting what has just been recorded, you are opening the newspaper to lawsuits." Duncan. "Newspapers are dying, we know that. I hope Troy accepts the offer to replace you as we plan to focus on electronic publishing." Duncan grinned. "As for you, Dan, you will quit and remember that you tripped over your car door. You will sue Troy, and this tape will go to the police and the press. I have several connections." It had been a little over a month since Rose's company event, and Troy was waiting on a park bench where he had his first real kiss with his wife. She approached with a polite smile, wearing headphones, a ski jacket, and ripped jeans. Troy thought Rose looked 100 times better than the last time he saw her a few weeks ago in the hospital. "Thank you for meeting me," Rose said. "Sorry, I'm late. I was very nervous before the meeting." Troy sighed and shook his head. "That's fine. Interesting choice of location. Well, if things don't get off to a bad start, we can go to the cafe on 11th Street and continue our conversation," Rose said. "I just wanted a more open place in case things get heated. Do you understand?" Troy nodded. "Okay, again, I want to say how sorry I am and that I would give anything to have that night back, and not just because of how it ended," Rose began. "You explained in your message how Dan Reed manipulated the situation, but that's no excuse. Yes, I was drunk, but I still knew what I was doing was wrong." Her eyes filled with tears, and she waved her hand in front of them. "I thought it would be easier after rehearsals. Troy, Cam and I had been dating for 6 months before we met. I know you never loved this guy, but like you, Cam had this vulnerability that he shared with me, but no one else. We had feelings for each other, but players and cheerleaders couldn't date, so when the Packers found out about us, I had to either leave or never see him again. I took a week to think about it and chose a support group, still hoping it would lead to my modeling career. I hope you can understand that when you proposed, I took time out this time 2 weeks, mostly lying by the pool, and decided I chose you over cheerleading and pursuing any modeling career. I never said you, but I was building my portfolio while trying to sign with an agency. I might have had some chance after the swimsuit calendar, but given how you reacted to it, I knew you wouldn't be able to handle it if I became a full-time model. Now, you know how Dan made me think that you were deliberately avoiding the evening where I was being awarded as Agent of the Year. You always complained every year. It seemed like something you could have done. It was just that the evening was for me so special. Well, Cam was there when I arrived. He had just broken up with his wife. That's probably why he had such a meltdown on the field, and he made me feel sorry for him. We chatted, drank, danced, and, sorry, but after 6 months, he knew how to read my mood. It was stupid, a drunken moment of sex just for selfish pleasure. When I returned home, still drunk, I tried my best to be angry with you so as not to hate myself so much. When I was alone, I cried all night until I fell asleep, praying that you would never find out. At one point, I was going to wake you up and tell you, but I decided that I couldn't hurt you like that and decided to try to bury the guilt and make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Of course, in the morning, I realized that there was a small chance of getting pregnant. I took these pills just to make sure I didn't get pregnant, and well, you know the rest. Troy was silent for some time, thinking over everything she had said. Judging from what he knew about Rose over almost 10 years together, she was honest and sincere and repentant. Also, the time he had to cool down made all those potential betrayals he was worried about much less likely. Rose, I have questions for you, but first I have to tell you something. Troy looked at his gloves. Now you know, next week I was again sent on a mission, not of my choosing, Dan once again interfering with our marriage to throw me off track. Or to pick me up, Rose said coldly. What? Troy said. I knew that creep when he covered the Packers before you, and he was kind of friends with Baxter. Not fishing buddies, but hung out together, Rose said. Even then, he would flirt with me if Baxter wasn't around. A few times at your work events and parties, he was too friendly with me. I thought he was harmless, but after what he did, I think he was hoping that after we broke up he could make a move. Troy looked down. Anyway, I'm sure you knew that I haven't been in the best of moods since that morning. The last day of the festival was a big dance party. I was upset with us and got very drunk. Rose raised her hand and looked at him with a very cold, emotionless expression on her face. I don't need to hear this. Mom called your work and found out where you were. She called your hotel room late at night and said the girl answered. She told Mom you were sleeping. I told her I deserved it, but I think you know how she feels about you now. I know you didn't do it on purpose to hurt me, so please don't say anything more about it, okay? Troy nodded. Okay, but I want to ask you a few questions. I don't think you have to answer, but I hope you will. Rose sighed and nodded, looking away from him at the snow-covered trees. Troy nodded. When did you stop wearing your wedding ring, and why didn't you talk to me for so long? Rose was silent for a moment, gesturing to show her hand, which had a pale spot on it where the ring used to be. They took it out for the surgery, and I guess I didn't see the point in putting it back on. I think it took longer than I intended, but there were big decisions to be made. I didn't want to date you until I knew what I wanted. So, it's true. Have you met with a divorce lawyer? Rose nodded and Troy's face tensed. So this delay was like after I proposed. You took time to decide what you really wanted. Yes, then I knew that nothing would work out if I continued to study cheerleading or modeling. I decided I couldn't risk losing you and decided against it. Troy stood up. So after one good fuck you decided you couldn't give it up, and now you're divorcing me. I should have known. He started walking towards his car. What? Rose squealed. Don't you dare leave after telling me that. Troy didn't pay attention and walked without even checking to see if she was following him. Without really caring at that moment, she made her choice. Troy was 10 feet from his car when someone grabbed him and pulled him hard by the arm. He turned to see Rose, looking as angry as ever. She said through clenched teeth, See, that's why I want a divorce. You and your damn complexes. The bravest and most confident man I know, but after all these years you still think you don't deserve me. Bullshit, you're not giving us a chance. You're still good enough to get them, Troy shouted back. So now I'm just a prostitute to you? Thank you for making my choice so much easier, Rose replied just as loudly. And for your information, I'm doing this for our son, not for sex. Oh, I'm sure I'll get it, but not until Brady recovers from all this crap. Stop making this a Brady thing. How stupid are you? Of course this is about Brady. Don't you see how hard it was for him? Imagine if we started living together again, only for everything to blow up a few weeks or months later because you couldn't get over the fact that I slept with someone you think is better than you. I'm not going to put our son through that kind of torture." Rose started crying and pointed at Troy. "Damn you for thinking I'm doing this for sex. I thought you, of all people, would know I'm not like that." "Yes, because you chose me, and now, being reminded of what you could have had, you have regrets." "I chose, it's you again, Troy. Not that it matters, but part of me felt less special after I quit cheerleading and stopped pursuing a modeling career. I felt a little simple, and here you are, with your huge personality. There were many times during our relationship when I felt that I did not deserve you. You want to talk about sex? Let's talk about sex. You're twice as good a lover as Baxter." I quickly remembered that after sleeping with him. Even drunk, even knowing I was going on, I was like, "Why are you putting yourself through this again?" "But you want a new lover. How the hell can I not take this as an insult? I want to try and make things right, and you." "Yes, Troy. Try," Rose said. "I'm not going to put our son through torture just to try. If I thought you could let it go, not get caught up in your inhibitions, I'd go home with you right now. Sorry, but I don't see that ever happening." "So you're giving up on us?" Troy said bitterly. Rose's eyes narrowed. "Troy Picker, can you say with certainty that you will be able to forget seeing me like this? Guarantee that I will be forgiven, and we will return to the happy couple we were and be together until Brady grows up?" "Well, no, but—" Troy thought it was a stupid question. No one can guarantee that any marriage will last. "See, here it is." She started crying again. "I love you and probably always will, but as much as I want to be with you until I'm old, I don't see that happening now. The best thing for everyone is to just rip the band-aid and move on. Please know I don't blame you. I take full responsibility for cheating and ruining our marriage. Goodbye, Troy. Find a lawyer and we can discuss the terms later. I see that you are not ready for this now, as I hoped." Troy didn't answer and walked towards his truck. He assumed Brady was waiting at Jason's. Rose was originally supposed to pick him up that evening, but Troy thought she would be coming home. Thank God he didn't tell Brady that some of what Rose said actually made sense. He didn't want to raise his son's hopes in vain. He wasn't surprised to learn when he arrived at his brother's that Lily had already taken Brady. Rose had no hope, and nothing he could have said that day would have changed her mind. His marriage was over. "So good, huh?" Jason said as Troy went down to the basement alone after dinner. Lisa had insisted he stay. "If it was better, she would have slept with him right in front of me," Troy said. They were a couple. They dated for 6 months. It seemed like Baxter still had feelings for her when he apologized. Rose didn't admit it, but I know she still has feelings for him. That's probably why she was ready for the last time in bed with him. She doesn't even want to try, even though I want to experience it. "Tell me what she said." Lisa joined the two men below. Troy recounted their conversation as accurately as he could remember. "Well, you both expressed your emotions and made a loud scene. That's actually a good thing," Lisa said. "And you both admitted that you hurt each other." "Yeah, well, it doesn't matter, does it?" Troy said bitterly. "Have either of you remarried? Started dating again?" "No, it's been a little over a month," Lisa said. "There's still hope. This was only your first real conversation since you both cheated on each other." "And she's definitely not thinking about getting back together with Baxter," Jason said. "Yes, I heard from the nurses that Rose and him were having a conversation when he walked in on her. I think her sister came with Brady just in time to prevent a real scream," Lisa added. "Rosa blames herself for cheating, but blames him for hurting you with this video." "Did she tell you that?" Troy said. Lisa shrugged. "A woman's intuition. The same one that says you two aren't done yet. You just need to show her that you can survive what she did. And you better do it. You're not yourself without her," Jason said. "Not yourself? Thanks," Troy said sarcastically. "Brother, I think I'm probably the only person who knows you almost as well as your wife does." The thing is, I knew you a lot better before Rose, Jason said. You were this big, lumbering, a shy guy until you learned to bluff your way into making everyone laugh. In sports, yes, you were always a confident beast, but off the field you pretended to be sociable when in reality you just wanted to be alone. You were an introvert pretending to be an extrovert. Keep this up and I'll start blushing, Troy said, rolling his eyes. See, there it is. You got uncomfortable and started making jokes, Jason said. But after you started dating Rose, you started making less jokes. You weren't bluffing anymore, you actually felt comfortable. That one. Troy, who was on the football field, began to become Troy off the field. Now look at yourself. You make radio and television appearances, host events. Yeah, I'm just used to it after all these years. That's all. No, Jay's right. You've become a lot more confident, at least to those who really knew you since things got serious with you and Rose, Lisa said. I don't think she knows that, but when you feel a little jealous, you probably just go back to that pre-Rosa Troy. At least that's been true since it happened. So you're saying she's right. I can't survive this, Troy said sarcastically and clapped. Nice motivational speech, guys. No, I'm saying that she doesn't understand how much you've changed because of her. If you try to make things right, I'm sure she'll see the Troy she married again, Lisa said and gently touched his shoulder. It will be. It's hard, and it will be hard at times, but with your history and how you've always been together. Sorry, Lisa, but I don't think you understand, Troy said, shaking his head angrily, trying not to raise his voice. Hypothetically, Jay, imagine if you had to watch Lisa have sex with someone else. Then, if she decides not to try to make things right even though you want her to, you can't say you won't think sex with you isn't good enough. Come on, said Lisa. A quickie while under the influence of alcohol will never compare to making love. Jason shrugged and nodded. You're probably right when you say that. I'd probably think there was something wrong with me too. I'd probably think the sex wasn't good enough just because she cheated in the first place. But I think I could survive it if it was a one-time, unplanned event. Well, if she didn't give you a chance, you'd feel like crap, and you'd be even more sure it was you. That's what it is. Sorry, you can't convince me that part of Rose's willingness to just walk away has nothing to do with me. She doesn't play games, but she may lie to spare feelings. Troy sighed heavily. Why are we even discussing this? She won't change her mind. I wish I had told Dan to go to hell and gone that night. Troy threw his hands up in defeat. Troy, she had major surgery. Do you really think her motive is to have sex with someone else after this? Insisted Lisa. And don't think that knowing that you cheated too doesn't weigh on her, especially because of the time. Maybe she's thinking about keeping you from being celibate because of her cheating. It could be a lot of different things, all of which have nothing to do with you not being good enough for her. Like I said, it's still fresh. If you really want to fix things, I'm sure counseling will help. Excellent consultants, and I can arrange for you to get to them right away. Troy rolled his eyes and texted Rose, I don't want to give up. Please, can we talk about this some more? I want to go to counseling. The answer came almost immediately. Please, Troy, don't make this any more complicated than it needs to be. Unless it's about Brady or the terms of the divorce, don't contact me again. Troy made a ta-da gesture and showed the correspondence to Lisa and Jason. Troy, I said it's still fresh, Lisa said, smiling sympathetically. I still don't think she's serious. I'm going to talk to her about what she's going through as a woman right now. Counseling wouldn't be a bad idea for her anyway. Do what you want. I have to get back. Thanks for dinner. Looks like I need to find a lawyer tomorrow. Probably need to get the house appraised. Troy, don't do anything hasty, Jason said. That's all we're saying. Hasty? She's cheating on me, and now she's not giving us a chance. She's making a hasty decision. I'll just accept it. Bye. Troy got up and left. This was a difficult night for Troy. He couldn't stop thinking about Rose, even though she probably took it easier with her mother than he did in their shared home, full of photographs and memories. Then he remembered that everything was the other way around in the first week of their separation. Perhaps that's why she wanted him to stay in the house. As the new sports editor, Troy had more work to do, so he immersed himself in reading potential articles to take his mind off the loneliness of an empty house. When there was nothing else to read, he watched TV until he fell asleep. That night he had a dream. Troy pulled back and paused to catch his breath. For the first time in a long time, he began to cry and could not stop. What if Jason is right, and he really can't live without Rose? He fell asleep again and spent a restless night, unable to shake off the dream. Brady was scheduled to return the next evening. Lily was supposed to bring him by agreement. Troy paced the room most of the morning, trying to shake off the sleep. At some moments he thought that this was a sign that he needed to listen to Lisa and try to convince Rosa more in order to fix everything. At other times he thought it meant he would never have sex with Rose again and had to accept it. Just before lunch, Troy picked up his phone and texted Rose, "How are you?" The immediate response was, "Troy, I told you not to do that." Troy was about to put down the phone, but his sleep was bothering him so much that he responded, "Please, can we just talk about you, not us? I'm not trying anything. I care about you as a friend." The last 3 words were strained and desperate. After 5 minutes, there was no answer, and Troy frowned and walked into the kitchen. He was eating the leftover pizza when he received a call from Rose's mother's phone. He expected a stern warning from Petunia to stay away from her daughter. Troy sighed and replied, "Hello." "Troy, what do you want?" Rose said in a strange tone. "Rose, yesterday everything was a blur. I really wanted to know things, but I never asked how you were feeling after the operation and in general." "Wonderful," Rose said coldly. "Actually, I had a full evening of sex last night. Expecting more later because that's all I want now." "Okay, I deserve it. Please, no matter what happens, I will always take care of you," Troy said calmly. "How are you really?" "I'm almost 30 years old and I don't have women's days," Rose snapped. "What do you think? The pain was much worse than after childbirth, and I'm afraid of sneezing. The stitches are really starting to sting and itch. Is that good enough for you?" "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," Troy said sincerely. "You mean one of the scariest moments in my life, when I wanted more than anything to have the person who meant the most to me there for support. And when I begged everyone to find you and make you come to me, I found out." Her voice trembled. "I found out that you were already in bed with another woman." Troy didn't know what to answer. Lisa was right. His transgression bothered Rose more than she let on. He tried to find words, but nothing came to mind. "Well, I only have myself to blame for that, can't I?" Rose said, breaking the awkward silence. "Listen, Lisa came by this morning pretending to bring some toy that Brady left at their place. I still don't want to go to couples counseling if this is a continuation." "No, I didn't know she was going to do that," Troy said. "She said you might need counseling for what you're going through. Rose, can't you accept that I'm just calling to find out how you are?" "Troy, we can't do this. Small talk like everything is fine," Rose said with disappointment in her voice. "It's working so far. Did they tell you about the likelihood of complications? Or when will you know if there will be any?" "Troy, this is a little personal," Rose said. "It sounds offended." After a pause, she said, "Okay, I can take hormones. My desire to have sex will probably be greatly affected. It will be a while before I know whether sex will hurt. The same goes for whether sex will be enjoyable. What did you want to know? And how do you deal with this?" "How? What the hell do you think?" Rose said in the hoarse voice she had when she started crying. "I hate myself for doing this. Not you, not Dan, not Baxter, but me. I made the choice to have sex." He said at night, "And on top of all this damn guilt, I'm sure my husband thinks I'm a huge cheater and will never be able to love me the same. Maybe he has already found someone else to love, and that is not all. This week I filed charges against a man who I thought cared about me because he filmed me without my consent just to make my husband suffer, which scares me because now everyone can find out what I did and who I am. Because what you think about me is true. I could have said no at any time. I let it all continue. I hate myself for this. Rose, I need you, Troy said quietly. There was a pause, and he heard her son and then blew her nose. What? Rose, I need you, Troy repeated. You said I was insecure when it came to you, and that's why you quit cheerleading. Sorry, that's bullshit. I was insecure, at least outside of football. Field, and realized that if I could make people laugh, they wouldn't notice how my hand was shaking. Again, you doubt that you are good enough, said Rose. I told you. No, Troy interrupted. Lisa and Jay talked to me about it, and they were right. They knew me before you. Yes, I was the class clown, but honestly, I felt like a car salesman trying to scam someone on a date. And then I met you. I didn't want to deceive you. I wanted to get to know you, and after learning how amazing you are, even more amazing than your appearance, I realized that I wanted to be good enough to win your heart. Troy, you were. No, I wasn't. I changed. You didn't notice because it happened when I was around you, and then it became part of who I am. Rose, you didn't make me feel insecure, you made me more confident. The man who could walk through the locker room and look into the eyes of an angry linebacker who lost his team. The man who is now the sports editor of Green Bay's leading newspaper. That confidence came from you, not because of your appearance, but because you believed that I was that person, and you made me believe it. It may have subsided a little when I felt that something or someone could take you away, but as long as you were with me, I felt like I could do anything, even surviving the drinking, both of us, and I really want to hear about your modeling career because that was news to me. He fell silent and heard her breathing, but there was no answer. Rose, he heard the phone hang up. Troy sighed and grabbed a beer from the fridge. At least you did your best, he told himself before taking a long sip. He was sitting on the couch when he heard the front door open and close with a bang. Troy stood up, and before he knew it, Rose was already there, kissing him. I'm so sorry this happened, and it will never happen again. So will you come home so we can make things right? No, I still think I need to leave, Rose said. Sorry, it's very serious. You need time, Troy said, disappointed, in order to decide about counseling. No, call Lisa right now, Rose said. I mean, I need to take everything slowly to deal with all of this. With what I did, with what you did, and with what we've said to each other since it happened, I want to see you. I want to hug and kiss you. But I think I need to gradually get used to sleeping in the same bed with you again. Not until I'm sure we're both ready to forgive what we did. I'll stay with my mom, and when it feels right, I'll come home. What if it never feels right? Rose smiled. I think it will, otherwise I wouldn't have come here. What you told me, I don't believe I changed you, but you reminded me why I need you in my life. I love you too much. 2 weeks after Cameron Baxter announced his retirement from football, it was announced that he had been charged with recording and distributing a video without consent. He pleaded guilty and his victim was never named, but was rumored to be a former Packers cheerleader. Rose never spoke to her again. Cameron followed his hospital visit and filed a restraining order against him after he tried to contact her shortly after announcing his resignation. As promised, Troy wrote a farewell article. However, instead of a touching tribute to his legacy, the article was a reminder of how a few bad decisions can undo all of an athlete's good deeds. Troy and Rose started going to counseling a few days after she agreed to go. At first, they started going on dates once a week, then twice a week, and a month after the start of counseling, they began spending nights together. After the third night, Rose and Troy decided that she should return home for good. After counseling revealed that Troy was particularly concerned about her potential infidelities when she was meeting and dining with clients, Rose tendered her resignation. Troy felt guilty, especially after learning that she had given up a potential modeling career for him, and they still needed double income. However, this turned out to be short-lived when Duncan and Rose surprised him at work by announcing that the newspaper had hired her as a consultant to work on the transition to electronic publishing. The salary was less than her previous job, but Troy considered it a small price to pay for both of them to have relatively normal work hours, aside from the occasional radio gig or television appearance he made occasionally. Sometimes there was still jealousy or mistrust from the cheating, but counseling gave them the tools to work through it, so it never lasted more than a few hours or got out of control. Although neither of them had fully gotten over what happened, Troy was confident that it wouldn't ruin their marriage. Other than a small scar, which Troy insisted was barely visible, Rose had no serious consequences from the surgery. 10 months after Troy watched the video, he lay next to Rose in bed, truly feeling like it couldn't get any better. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.